This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so let me just turn to that. Michelle Page, who's our communications director with the branch, has just started recording this session. So once again, just as a disclaimer, if you don't want to appear on camera, then don't. And if you don't want to be involved at all in a recording, then you're going to have to leave. Sorry, those are the choices you have. So quick rules of engagement once again. We're going to have Florentina do her presentation. There's two ways to ask questions as we go along. You can either use the chat function, and I'm watching that as we go along. And then after the presentation's over, we'll have an open question and answer period. So let me just go straight into it then, since I think that's all I have to say. So Florentina Vasile, this is her second presentation with us in a few months. The last one she did was on wills and testaments, which was extremely interesting. And she's a very versatile lady. She is with the National Bank, and she's both a financial planner and succession planner. And she has a number of different certifications in that. But for today's presentation, what we're going to be focusing on is money. So when you retire, you have access or you have availability of certain kind of monies. So what is it you should take when you do retire? How should you take it, and in what order should you take it, and what do you need to know about those different amounts of money or revenue flows that you get? So I'm going to stop there because it's not my meeting. I'll turn it over to Florentina and let her go. So Florentina, the meeting is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you so much for listening and connecting to us today. So my role today is just to make you a bit more sensitive about the retirement and why you should plan all that retirement, not only for having good time once you retire, but also to make sure that the money that you accumulated or the revenues, the incomes that you will be having, it will be enough for as much possible time. So we'll be starting discussing about myths and belief about retirement. First of all, we are having a frequent example. I'm 60. Should I take my QPP now? My neighbor took it. So what we say for that, it's the right decision. It doesn't exist. It depends most of the time about your life expectancy. If you live longer, you would be having a lot more interest to take it as late as possible, because of the fact that you'll be having a bona fide rent. So that's why we're suggesting to make sure you're evaluating all the risk before taking that kind of decision. But the one that you should keep in mind is, if you think that you'll be living longer, you could have a big interest by having the QPP as late as possible. If you think that you might have some disease or a lot of people around you in the family that died earlier, you could think about taking a bit faster. We'll be seeing that information a bit further in the presentation. Also, another myth is that I'm paying my mortgage first and I'll invest after for the retirement. We say about that it's important to do both, but in the same time, the most important thing to think about it is the fact that you have to take in consideration the rate of the mortgage versus the investment rate that you're expecting to have, and also the fact that if, for example, once you're not yet retired, you're still having a big rate of tax bracket to pay, then you could have more advantage, for example, to invest into an RSP than just saving the interest on the mortgage. Another myth is that my expenses should decrease during retirement. It could, it could. It happens to most of the people, but it always depends of what kind of level of life would you like to have during retirement. There are people that won't have any more their mortgage, won't have any more their children to pay for their scholarity, but also there are people that would like to travel more, do buy a cottage and something like that. So it always depends. It's not true for everybody that your expensive will be decreasing during the retirement. Another myth is that withdrawing the minimum amount of a RIF, it's a good strategy to make sure that you're having enough liquidity. It it might be partly true. It depends of what other income do you have, and especially of about your cost of life. If you have enough income from your investment, normally you might not need the RIF, the tax bracket, not to withdraw from it, or will be see a bit further that in some situation you'll be having some interest on withdrawing a bit more from the RIF in some period of times. The market are uncertain. I'm close to retirement. I should transfer. I'm sorry. I should transfer my investment into guaranteed capital certificates. That's a big risk that we'll be speaking about a bit later too, because you have to understand that even if you're retiring, you're having a long period in front of you for the disbursement of your investments. Normally, when we retire about 60, 65, you're still having at least 25 to 30 years in front of you. At least that's the expectancy for normal people. So we try to make sure that people have enough money until 1995 years old. So even if you're thinking that you might not need money for a longer period of time, the investment return that you'll be having, it's very important because that's one of the risks at the retirement. I can split all my income with my spouse. Um, that's not true. We'll be see it a bit further. I have for information for the income splitting, so that's not completely true. We have some income that we can split, but some of them they aren't. So we can go to the next page. Mrs. Page? So the risk during retirement, first of all, it's time. We said before that a person who's retiring, it's not necessarily dying tomorrow morning. We don't know that, but we go when we do retirement planning, we'll do with the life expectancy. And normally somebody who's 60, we will have to bring it at least until 90, 94 years old. And it's shown too that when you're in a couple, you also have the tendency of living longer. Normally for a couple, we do planning for around 96. So that's why we're saying it's important to make sure that you're figuring the withdrawing of your incomes and your investment for a longer period of time. That's why by doing the planning, we're able to say to people, are you able to keep that cost of life that you imagine for a longer period of time, or you should do some concessions either now or later. So that's something that we are able to confirm with planning. The inflation, that's something very important that we take in consideration when we're doing a retirement planning. The reason is that some incomes are not following the inflation, some are. So that's something that we do take in consideration. For example, somebody that would like to spend $40,000 a year. The $40,000 from now, it's not the same one in 15 years. So that's why it's important to make sure when you're saying if you're having enough money or not for your retirement, take in consideration the inflation. As is right now, when we're doing a retirement planning, we're keeping an average of 2.1%. So even if it's not the real inflation rate as right now, that's an average that we take in consideration for a longer period of time. Also, another risk for the retirement, it's the healthcare that most of the people don't take in consideration by saying that we have a good system in Canada and that might not happen to them, but most of the time we neglect that part because once we get older, a lot more health issues that are appearing. And also in the same time, it's important to make sure that that's a risk that you want to take in consideration when you're seeing on a longer period of time you're planning, because most of the people they're saying I want to spend a bit more at the beginning of the retirement, and they say, oh, at 80 I won't be traveling that much, but at 80 you might spend more money, for example, for some pills, and that's something that you should take in consideration. When we speak about asset allocation as a risk, we're just saying that most of the people, once they retire, they're starting already thinking that they should be very conservative into their portfolio. And we're trying to say that each account could have a different allocation, as you're not withdrawing your complete amount that you had accumulated in 1 year. So most of the time we're doing that progressively. So that's why you shouldn't go very, very conservative from the beginning of the retirement. That's for sure. We always encourage to go with the kind of portfolio that you're comfortable with. But you shouldn't fail. Think about changing.
Is being recorded.
Are you still hearing me?
Yes, but we don't see you anymore. Okay.
Okay, I do see
Oh, now
myself.
it's
So
okay. It comes coming back.
okay, perfect. So we're speaking just about the risk of doing too many withdrawals too fast at the retirement. So that's something that we try to avoid by doing a planning. We're able to say to people how much money they could spend every single year, taking in consideration the inflation and the investment rate that we consider. But at least we're able to confirm if they are able to maintain that level of expenses, or they should do some concession at one point. We can go to the next page. Can we go back one page, please? Okay. So why should you have a retirement planning? First of all, we're trying to make sure that you're minimizing the tax that you will be paying over the years with the income that you have accumulated for the retirement, and also with your investments. So that's why we're there for you. So as a financial planner, we're able to give you the factors that will make you pay less of income. On always suggesting to meet with your accountant, because he will be able every single year to make sure that you're maximizing your tax. So also the reason why you should have a retirement plan is that we discuss a lot about the cost of life, and the fact that we'll be able to confirm with the incomes that you have and your investment that you accumulated and other sources that you might have, if you're okay to maintain the same kind of level of risk of life that you had imagined. And also we're there to make sure that you're having the right decision about the pension plan, the government pension plan. When should you take the QPP and the old pension plan, and why you should wait or take it earlier. We're able to show with the real details in money how much that it's worthing by waiting a bit less later or taking a bit faster. We can go to the next page. So how could I pay less taxes during retirement? That's for sure. It is possible. It's always important. The most important thing is to make sure that you're doing your retirement planning and your disbursement planning as fast as possible once you retire, because we do see people a bit later, maybe around 67, 68, and that makes a bit later for strategies. So it's important to do it as soon as possible to make sure you discuss with your accountant, you discuss with the financial planner, and then you make sure that you have a match, a plan match. So that's very, very important. We can go to the next page. So how to start to do a planning? First of all, the most important is to make sure that you have a budget. That's something that we see frequently, that people, unfortunately, they don't have an idea of how they are spending and how they will be spending at the retirement. So we have two different options for people to figure out their cost of lives. So either you go with a budget, that's the most suggested, because it will allow you to see where you're spending most of the money. And also we have the second option, when you take a look at how much money it's left net after taxes, and then you take out the investments that you're doing once a year, and what's left, that means you're spending that money. So that's a big faster to establish your cost of life. So also what we say, it's important to think about what your goals with your retirement planning. So would you like to buy a cottage? Would you like to travel more? What kind of expenses do you think you'll be doing? Because most of the time we're doing a retirement planning for many years. So it's important to make sure that you're imagining what kind of goals do you have. Also, we take a look if income splitting it's a possibility. We recommend to make sure that you discuss with your financial planner about your portfolio allocation, as we just want to make sure that you're having the good portfolio for the many years in front of you, and also to have the best advices about the government benefits. And if you have any kind of register plans, for example, old pension plan that you had brought to your institution, we might have some strategy to make sure that we're giving you more flexibility on those money that normally they are locked in, but there are some plans that allow us to do some changes that will allow you to transfer a portion of the money into an RSP. We can go to the next page. So what should we take out first about our investment? The reason it's none of the answer will be perfect, because every situation is different. So it always depends of your other incomes that you're having. So normally we might say that you could take out the non-register at the beginning, the TFSA after, and the RSP, but it's not always optimal for every people, because there are some people that can do the income splitting. They might have an advantage by withdrawing a bit faster from their RIFs by converting into a lift now. So you could do that. So in some cases, you could withdraw from your RSP a bit faster. If, for example, you intend to take a bit later the QPP pension plan or the old pension plan, we can take some withdrawals from your RSP or your RIF before 71. If not, in some cases, it's shown that by waiting just before 71, it could be also a good way to do it. It's depending especially about your cost of life, your other incomes, and if you really need it or not, or if it's good for you on the tax bracket to take some money out. So that's the main goal, to make sure you're paying as smallest tax on your income. So it depends especially about your cost of life and your other incomes. We can go to the next page. So when should I convert my RSP into RIFs and why? So at 71 years, 31 of December of my 71 years, the government obligates me to transfer all my RSPs into a RIF and withdraw an amount every single year. But you can also think about it, doing it before, for a couple of reasons. First of all, we'll be discussing a bit further about income splitting. So for doing the income splitting, you could think about transferring RSP into RIF, because the RSP as is it, you cannot do that. So at 65, if you want to do the income splitting with your husband, wife, you should think about converting a portion or the total amount into a RIF. Also, if, for example, you might need some money out from your RSP, but you have, for example, a capital guarantee for 5 years that it's not yet to maturity, by converting to RIF, you could have access a bit faster to your money, because even if it's not to maturity, once it's in a RIF, the institution has the obligation of withdrawing you the money and give you access, as it's one of the conditions for the RIFs. We can go to the next page. So some strategy about RSP, RIF, LIF. So we're just saying that once you retire, most of the time you might not need to do contribution for an RSP. But if, for example, you're expecting to have big incomes, for example, by selling a cottage, or still having some rental properties that are giving you more income that you would like, you could think about seeing if you have any kind of unused contribution to an RSP, and maximize your contribution before 71, because you have up to 71 years to do a contribution into your own RSP. But if your spouse is younger than you, you can have up to 71 years of her birthday to do a contribution into a spousal RSP, and that will still allow you to deduct that contribution even if you're 75. So also, if you have a big difference of age with your husband, wife, then you could think about, if you don't, especially if it's not good for you for the taxes, you could think about withdrawing the minimum of the RIF annually by setting the date, the withdrawals based on your spousal age. Also, in case you have any kind of locked-in programs, so old pension plan that you transfer with the bank, see with the financial planner if you could have more flexibility by doing some withdrawals or transferring into an RSP. There are some plans that allow us to do that. We can go to the next page. For the TFSA, we're just saying that it's important to maximize, if you have the possibility, your TFSA. Just to let you know, for next year, the TFSA it's growing, so we can put up to 6,500. And also, if you have money into a non-registered account, we are always suggesting that you should transfer the maximum annually into a TFSA to make sure that you're having less income that from non-registered that will be taxable. By putting into the TFSA, you won't be paying taxes on the income you're doing on the investment return. Also, if you have the chance, you should always consider putting money into early in the year into a TFSA, because it will allow you to maximize the investment return as soon as possible within tax bracket with no tax. So can we go to the next page? I'm going very fast because we have a couple of information more. So I'll try to be as fast as possible to give you the time to also ask your question. But as we're a smaller group, I think I will be having a bit more time. So I'll be taking maybe 5 minutes more before starting the question. So we're saying when to take your QPP pension. it's depending of two factors. One of them is your source of income. Somebody who has very limited income could be considering taking the QPP pension as soon as possible. So it's 60, even if you're having a penalty. But somebody who has multiple sources of income could be thinking about the possibility of benefiting of QPP pension bonified. Or if you have a life expectancy that it's shorter, you could think about it, take it at 60. But if you have lots of people in your family that it's they live at 90, 95, you could think about having a benefit of waiting until 70 years. That's something that we can recommend. So we can go to the next page. I'm sorry. So what you should think about when you're deciding about the QPP pension is that the fact that the QPP pension plan, it's guaranteed. So that's a pension plan for life, and it's also protected against inflation. Every single year it's bonified, to take that in consideration. Also, if you have a difference between you and your spouse on the amount that you're receiving from the QPP, you can call the QPP pension and ask them to divide the amounts between you and your spouse. That's another form of income splitting. The QPP, it's available at 60, but if you take that kind of decision, you're having 36% of penalty. So that's a penalty for life. So normally it's around 0.6% every single month that you're taking it before 65 years. When you're taking it at 60, you're having the 100% of your pension. And when you're waiting until 75, every month that you're deferring, it's giving you a 0.7% of bonus, up to maximum 42% about that amount that you should have received at 65. So we can go to the next page. Also, it's very important. We want to also discuss about the old age security pension. What we want to say is that that's an amount that it's given to everybody, but it also might have a penalty when you're doing too much income within a year. That's why today we wanted to speak to you about income splitting and some strategy that you could benefit from to make sure that you're receiving as much possible of the old pension plan. So the government is saying that you can take it at 65, you're having the full amount, but you can also defer to 70 years, and every amount that you're deferring, you're having a bonus of 0.6%. But what's the most important to know is that if your sources of income, for example, in 2022 were 81,761, at that point, the government, it's starting cutting 50% about all the amount that it's going over that limit. So if you're doing a 100K of income, you'll be having around $19,000 that will going over. So you have to multiply 50% on that, and that will be the portion of the amount. It's net. So that will be the amount that you will be sending back to the government. So that's why income splitting could be very interesting in some couples. And we're saying that if you're 65 to 74, if you're having $134,000 and more, you're losing completely the whole pension plan. Can go to the next page, and we're showing you some strategy about how to make sure that you're giving to government as less as possible. So it's important to make sure that if you can do an income splitting within your couple, if you can split the QPP pension as we discussed before, and to make sure that you're minimizing your investments, that it's giving you interest or investment return that it's taxable. So normally we try to eliminate first the non-register and then the TFSA. And if you need to do it, we then recommend to limit the RIFs withdrawal to the minimum. We can go to the next page. So when we're speaking about income splitting, the most important thing to know is that you could transfer on paper up to 50% of some incomes that you're having to your spousal. So how it works is that if you have a pension plan, you need to know that on the federal side, you can do income splitting as soon as you receive your pension plan. But for the Quebec side, you need to wait until you're 65. So once you're 65, you can do both sides, federal and provincial. And also after 65, you can also do income splitting with your spousal for example, the RIFs. If you transfer your RSP into a RIF, you can transfer up to 50% of that, about the amount that you withdraw that year to your spousal. If we do take a look and we see that it might be beneficial, especially if you have a difference into your incomes. So at the next page, we're giving you a very fast example. So can we go to the next page, please? Okay, so if you take a look, we have Diane that she's earning $88,000 for that year, and Peter that he was only doing $7,511. And what you take a look after is that Diane, by having more income than the minimum at 81, she's starting being capped. So that means that she will only receive 4,500, and her husband, he will receive completely the full amount. And by doing the income splitting, we'll be seeing that they're both doing the same amount as we transfer 50% to Peter. And that will allow her to receive the full amount for the old pension plan, the 7,500 around. And after all, by having less income to pay, and also by recovering a bit more of the old pension plan, that means for that couple, some economies about $8,700. So that's why we're saying you need to take a look with your accountant or a financial planner to see if you could benefit from the income splitting and how to maximize it. So that was the presentation. We now have the time to put some questions if you have.
Okay, Florentina, thanks very much. That was most interesting.
Thank you.
I have a question, but I'm going to let the other members of the group ask theirs first. So I have one from Joseph Tremblay. He says, with respect to the Registered Retirement Income Fund, can a GIC be withdrawn before maturity without penalty when the GIC
Yes.
is part of an RIF?
Yeah, especially now, we do recommend to people for those who like GACs, to make sure that they take the term the longest to enjoy the new high interest that we are having as of right now. The reason is that when you have RSP, you can convert it at any time into a RIF, and then withdrawing completely, even if it's not matured, and you won't have any kind of penalty on that. The only penalty is that you're not having the interest rate for 10 years, you're withdrawing the same year. So that means that you only do 1 year of interest, but it's no real penalty. The bank will allow you to withdraw completely the full amount if you need it.
Joseph, you're on the line, so step in if I don't get this right. But I think if I interpret your question correctly, is that if your GIC is part of a RIF, it's already part of a RIF, because it's part of a RIF, can you withdraw that early and there's no penalty?
Exactly.
Joseph, I know he's out there, I see him. Yeah, okay, thumbs up. Okay, that's fine. That was the answer. Yes, that was his question. Can he? So example, Florentina, I have I move, okay. I have a GIC in a RIF that's worth $1,000. Because it's in a RIF and it's, let's say, a year term, can I take it out after 6 months? No
Yes.
penalty just because it's part of a RIF? Or does
Exactly.
the GIC contract still hold?
No. So it holds on for everything else, for TFSA, for an RSP, like is it. But once it's in a RIF, we're obligated to give access to people to the money if they need to do withdrawals.
Okay, and there's another question from Denis Rousseau. So who said, excuse me, Denis, I got this faint blue type in my Zoom chat and I can barely read it. So he asked, is the 81,761 gross or net? And I think that's probably the question for all the figures you have, Florentina. Are you talking about gross? And I saw in some slides you also had taxes as well. So
Exactly. So we are just saying not just like if you have any kind of RSP that you deducted, it's after that. But if not, it's all the full income that you have done for the 2022. Let's say you have your QPP, you have your pension plan, you have your investment that it's giving you interest, for example, and whatever. If the total it's 84, the $2,000 around that it's over, you would be penalized of 15% on that amount, and that will be the amount that you will be giving back to the government. So you're not necessarily giving back because your income from this year will establish your payments for next year. So you're not giving back; they're only cutting you after 1 year. So next year they will cutting you because of your income of this year.
Okay, so that was the chat questions. If anybody else has a question, just open your mic and jump in, please. Joseph, your hand's up. Do you want to say something, or is that Joseph Tremblay?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Just to go back to 81,761. So this is the total gross income for the year, including all pension plan, any kind of like disbursement that you have. Like this is, I guess, ideally the amount not to exceed in gross income for the year before being penalized. Is that
exactly? So that's yeah. It's exactly the thing that we're looking when we're taking a look at the disbursement that people want to do. We make sure that every single year you're trying not to exceed that amount to make sure that you're not being cutted for the old pension plan, because in some situation we take a look that people would like, for example, to postpone, for example, to wait until they are taking the QPP or the old pension plan. And by having a bonification, by waiting at 70, you're having even more income, and that could be also penalizing yourself. So you might have a bonification about the fact that you have been waiting until 70, but in the same time you might be cutted because of the fact that you're doing more income than the $82,000 during the year. So that's something that we take in consideration too when we're taking a look at the retirement planning, to make sure that people don't get penalized by waiting, for example. So that's why
Joseph?
also in some cases, yeah. So I don't know if that responded to the question. Okay, perfect. So
I
if
would have another follow-up question, unless somebody else has some. Like, can I go ahead?
Yeah.
we're having time, so you can.
Yeah, you're on a roll, Joseph.
Okay, no problem. I may be helpful to others, so I'll ask question, but everybody is welcome to ask. I heard the term, I guess, a retirement income bubble that can occur around 71 when I guess the government forces you like to withdraw. So like, Is that a risk that people end up facing if they do not draw enough early on or before 71? Thank you.
Exactly. That's a great question. That's why we're recommending to people to do their retirement planning as soon as possible. Because if you come and see us when you're 70, let's say 67, we only have 3-4 years before the minimum will be obligated you'll be obligated to withdraw from the RIFs. So that's why once we planify it a bit faster, we're able, for example, to take a look if it's good for you to withdraw a bit more from the RIFs or the RSP before 71, as the amount that you will be still having left at 71, that will be the amount that it's calculated, the percentage that it's obligated to, that you're obligated to withdraw at 71. So if we have the chance and if it's benefit for yourself to do withdrawals before, that's something that we want to take a look, because in some cases it's recommended to do withdrawals a bit faster, as we see that your tax level will be the same one. So we could imagine by withdrawing, let's say, $20,000 from your RSP. So if we have 10 years in front of us, that's an amount that you'll be having less at 71. So your minimum at 71, it will be a bit lower. But in some cases, we take a look, and even at the beginning of the retirement, the pension plan is good and won't necessarily be in your advantage of withdrawing more. So you should then keep only the minimum at 71, and eventually, if you have the possibility to have a spouse that it's a bit younger, will allow you to do the minimum withdraw based on its age, and that will allow you maybe to withdraw a bit less every single year.
If that's good, Joseph, I'm going to ask Joanne Papineau to ask her question.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Florentina. I'm just, with regard to the QPP, I'm a bit confused because my financial advisor sort of advised me the opposite. He said, take it as soon as you can, which I took it, I started taking it at 61 when I retired, but because he said the amount you make over the 5 years will sort of compensate for the rest of, but again, now what I'm hearing is sort of the opposite. So maybe I'm not sure I made the right decision, but he sort of said the opposite. He said, if you think you're going to live long, also, you can take it, for the next 5 years, you're getting that income, you can invest in it, and then it will sort of, compensate for other than taking it 65 or later.
It's very rare that we recommend the QPP pension plan at 60 or less than 65, because we've seen it before. The only reason why we would recommend it to take it a bit faster is, for example, if we take a look and you're having too many good incomes, and that means that at one point you'd be taxed too much and you don't have any advantage by bonifying your monthly rent, because of the fact that at one point it will be having a bad impact, for example, on the old pension plan. But normally the biggest factor that we take in consideration, it's your life expectancy. If it's shown that for you to be having an advantage on taking it a bit faster, it's if you die before 74 years. If you're going over 74 years, then you could be having the benefit on reporting to 65. And if you think that you'll be living at 84 and more, you could be also having advantage on waiting even longer, like 70. But that's a risk too.
Okay.
So that's something that you should take in consideration, because the QPP pension plan, that's something that you have contributed all your life. The old pension plan, it's given for free to everybody. You only had to live in Canada for 40 years, but the QPP you had contributed. So if you die, for example, we give an example, We had it a bit this morning in French. So if you die at 66 and you decided to take it at 70 because you wanted to have like a bona fide pension, if you die at 66 and you don't have a spousal that qualifies, then that would mean that you had contributed all your life, but you did not benefit from it at all. So that's a risk that you're having by waiting, but also the risk of you living at 99 and missing money at one point. That's why we normally recommend to wait before asking it. So if you have a spousal that is qualifying, it will be still have a continuity of the QPP pension plan, because your spousal will be having a calculate and having a bit more of his QPP pension. So at least you're knowing that somebody will benefit from that. But if you die and you did not take it, or you take it at 66 and you only benefit 2 years from it, that's for sure. That's something that unfortunately we cannot do a change after.
Okay, well, thank you very much. No, it makes total sense. I'll just have to ask my financial advisor why he recommended I take it earlier than later, because I do plan on living a long life. But anyway, thank you, merci.
You're welcome. So normally what I do when I do retirement planning, I'm doing both scenarios. So one that you're taking at 60 and one that you're taking at 65 or 70. And then we take a look on a longer period of time. For example, if you die at 75 or 90, was that a good decision? In some cases, it might represent 90, let's say $50,000 more at 90 years. But if you die at 75, the person who took it at 60 would have had benefited from it a bit faster. So it's always depending, but we are showing to people the two different scenarios for them to be able to say, oh, that $50,000 will be making a big difference in my life, or no, that's not changing very much for me, and I would like to enjoy it as soon as possible, and I'll be taking it at 60. So we normally do a recommendation, but we'll also go if the client has other incomes and his cost of life allows it. We don't necessarily push people to take it at 65 or 70 if they wanted to take it a bit faster. But when it's necessary, for example, you are not able to maintain the same cost of life, then we show why it's very important to postpone it if it's possible.
Florentina, we had, okay, well, first of all, we had one comment from Denis Roussel. I don't know what to say about this, except, anyway, he said, with all the retirement training I took and with our superannuation plan, I guess that's with our government pension people, it is the first time I hear about taking CPP, QPP later than sooner. So I know that's not my case, but go ahead.
But I do heard lots of people who have made in the past planning with the government saying that the government was before saying to take it at 60. But most of the time now I hear that with the retirement that there are some courses that you can do with the government, and now they're recommending to postpone it. So not a lot of people think about the bonification because it's 42% that you're living on the table. But again, it's depending of your other incomes. It depends if you need it. It depends if it will have a big impact in your life, if you would be able to spend more, for example, by having more of your QPP pension. So we take a look at the financial situation of the client, and then we take a look if it's beneficial really or not. But most of the financial planner will always recommend you to postpone if it's possible, to make sure that you're keeping it for the rest of life. You will be having a bona fide rent. So that's why normally we're recommended to wait.
Thanks. Another question from Joseph. He said, can Ms. Vasile explain the difference between an RRIF and a LIF, a life income fund?
Yeah, so the RIF, it's a continuation of the RSP, the LIF. It's really an old pension plan that you, a pension plan that you would had, for example, with an employer that you brought it to the bank and that it's locked in. That's why we call it like that. It's locked in. The funds that are inside, they are having some restrictions, so you cannot withdraw from it as you would be doing from an RSP or from a RIF. When you have an old pension that you had with your employer that you brought it into the bank, then you will be only be able to take some amount every single year. You have a minimum as for example, for the RIF, but you also have a maximum. So that's why normally, for example, when we have clients that they quitted the government at one point and they brought their pension plan to the bank, let's say that, you're having a portion that it's frozen, that it's locked in. That portion, it's having a restriction about what you're being able to withdraw from it. But once you're 55 years old, we have the possibility as a financial planner to transfer half of that amount that it's locked in once in a lifetime into an RSP. So that's some of the strategies that we normally take a look with the clients if they have had a pension plan in the past with an employer that they brought it. We take a look if there's any possibility on doing some strategies like that that will allow you to transfer half of it into an RSP, because by transferring into an RSP, you will have more flexibility as you can withdraw as much as you'd like into an RSP. But when you have a locked-in program, then you have restriction about how much you can withdraw from it. And when you're depending of that investments to maintain your cost of life, it's even more important to make sure that you have as much as flexibility as possible.
Joseph, your hand's still up. Do you have a supplementary question? Or are you good? All right, I'm taking the
Thumbs up for
emoji.
me.
Thanks, Joseph. So here's my quick question, Florentina. I just retired this year, but I don't, I took QPP because I was 72. I figured I may as well. I don't need it, but I took it anyway. But in Quebec, is there a difference between the QPP and an old age security? Are they two separate programs, or are they both really one?
So the old pension plan, it's for the federal. So that's free for everybody that have lived in Canada for 40 years. So you're qualifying, it's around 7,500. That's for everybody. And you can have the beneficiation if you wait. We discuss about that. But the QPP pension plan, it's only applying for the Quebec side. You have an equivalent in Ontario that it's the same kind of a program. It's the same thing. You're contributing into your income every single month on that QPP pension. So the QPP pension, it's directly affected by your contribution that you've made over the years, and the old pension plan is the same one for everybody, but it's cut at some point when you're doing too much income.
Okay, thanks. Clear. Anyone else? We're getting close to the end anyway. Okay, so
Valentina, are you going to talk about the special program about buying a house that you talked this morning about?
So yeah, somebody asked the question this morning. So the CELI app, it's a new program that will appear in 2023 for a person that they didn't had a house for the past, didn't buy a house for the past 5 years. The government will allow you next year to open an account. The reason, the way to qualify is that you have to make sure that you did not buy a house for the past 5 years, and then you could do some annually contribution. It's $8,000 a year. You can either do a contribution with your own money, and that then you will be having a deduction as for an RSP, or for example, if you have already a RSP, you can transfer them. You won't be having a double deduction, but at least you have that possibility. And if you buy a house with those amounts, the government will allow you to withdraw all the amounts that you had invested plus the investment return, with no tax to be paid. For example, when you have an RSP, normally you will be paying a tax when you take the money out. But if you're buying a house and you open a CELIAP, you will be having the deduction, you'll be having your investment return within tax bracket, so you won't be paying a tax until you're not withdrawing. And if you are withdrawing for buying a house and you're qualifying for that, you'll be not ever paying tax on the amounts that you have withdrawn. So that's a very interesting plan. Might apply for you, might apply for your children. It depends. So the thing that you have to take in consideration, it's a maximum of $8,000 of a year for a maximum of $40,000 in a lifetime that you could put into CELIAP and then withdrawing with no tax to be paid if you're buying a house. If you're not buying a house, then you'll be paying taxes as it would have been paid, for example, into an RSP.
Okay, thanks for that, Florentina. So before I leave everybody today, I just want a couple of pieces of news from the branch. We're having a very special 30th anniversary celebration this Friday, actually, Saturday, actually. And today is the last day to register if you want to attend. I think the registrations are open until 5 o'clock. It's going to be quite the show, and very good evening for not very much money. And the second thing is that we will be sending you a short survey after this, just a couple of minutes, 2-3 questions asking you how